The moment you go online, you are recorded as having gone online. You leave a print. People know roughly where you're coming from, and they know you've entered a site. And once you've entered that site, it can say where you're going in that site, where you don't go in that site, what you look at, what you don't look at, what search terms you use, what documents you decide to display, and how long you're there, and where you go next. And by putting all those things together, we can begin to develop characteristics of information-seeking behavior and use in cyberspace. It's very, very simple, and it's done automatically, which is the beauty. And anybody could do it, essentially, but don't.
Well, one way in which you'll give up personal information is obviously by clicking on one thing or another that reveals the sorts of things you're interested in. But how would they get from that to actually figuring out, for instance, who you are? Well, it's well known in the privacy world that things like your birth date, your gender, and your postal code or zip code will allow people to figure out who you actually are, what your true name is. Now, how might a website get that information from you? Well, let's say you want to sign up for a horoscope. Then you're going to give them your birth date and probably tell them whether or not you're a man or a woman. Then maybe you want to find out what your local weather is. Probably the easiest way to do that is to put in your postal code or zip code. And bingo, they've got 3 pieces of information that are going to make it really easy for them to figure out exactly who you are. I mean, there's an enormous amount of public record data that's available about people. And so in the United States, for instance, there are lots and lots of records. Some of these are voting rolls, other kinds of public records that will contain people's true name and address and gender. So what they can do is they can figure out by cross-linking those records with the information they have and say, oh, well, you know, this is the only person in this postal code who is of that age and of that gender. And that way they will be able to figure out who you are.
I think that people have patchy understanding of data on the web. It's such an enormously complex subject. You know, retailers might use data in a completely different way to search engines. You know, I don't think anybody has ever had access to Google's search algorithms and what that means if you are suddenly at the top of the search when you look for something, or if you suddenly fall to the bottom. You know, that's something that's very murky and behind the scenes. But similarly, I think that retailers, by and large, have a pretty good, open, transparent policies. They tell you what you're doing with your data. You read terms and conditions. You know, we were always tried to be very transparent with rmbusinesslastminute.com, like every, you know, proper retailer now. So I think it's enormous varying degrees. I think the big piece that's obviously come from nowhere in the last few years, the hot topic of social media. I think that people are only beginning to understand what it might mean to post things about yourself in a public forum that then might be looked at by people that you work with, or might be looked at by people that might employ you in the future. Or, you know, that whole area, I think, is where people are now only beginning to have a think about what that might mean for them.
Here's what everybody's been trying to tell you today, and I say this gently. Your user agreement sucks.
I think AdWords was the single most important economic milestone of the internet to date. I think there'll be others that are more important in the future. But you know, and you're speaking as to someone who worked on the team that put the first banner on the web, so I'm giving quarter. More important than that, than the AT&T ad on Hotwired in 1994. But it provided a platform and inverted the model of marketing and forced marketers, not immediately, but over a number of years, to recognize the power of the internet and to have to shift the way they thought about how they had conversations with customers. Because the model was, you didn't pay until someone clicked. Completely opposite than the model of almost all the rest of dollars in marketing, which were, you paid and hoped someone called. You paid for impressions, not for actions. And when people did click, you wouldn't be successful unless you had something on the other end of that delivered value. So now you not only had to understand someone's intent, you then had to offer a service that would deliver on that intent, which meant that marketers had to start seeing the internet as something that was essential to their business as opposed to another marketing channel. So it really shifted, it augured a very important shift of all of business to using the internet as a platform for business as opposed to, oh, it's that thing over there where we buy some ads and put some banners up. And we're only beginning to see that shift truly take fruition. I think it was a pivot point in the history of how the internet economy works. And I think we're kind of in the second inning now, really. But it was a very big first step.
I think people are, whether explicitly or implicitly, pretty aware of what the trade-off is, and I don't think that's explicit. I don't think that's necessarily just for Google. I think as we go online, the deal is relatively straightforward. So when you go on Amazon and you click, and as you click through from product to product to product, you start to see the recommendations appear, either based on your past history or more typically your session. As you start looking for cameras, you start to see people who looked at this also looked at that. People who bought this, people who clicked at this bought that. In the course of your clicking, the service becomes more useful to you. The implicit, and for many people the explicit trade-off is that in exchange for watching over your shoulder as you shop, we will help you shop better. And no one seems to have any problem with this because this is they trust Amazon, and this is if you go into a store and the store assistant says, "Can I help you?" And if the store assistant is good and you're feeling like you need help, you'll go through this little communication. Here's what I'm looking for. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? A little more of this. The advice will get better and better and better, and eventually you will get what you want. Amazon does this exact same thing. So there's nothing new about this trade-off. In the same way that you don't, that in the store, as the assistant helps you shop, you're choosing to give up information about your preferences for the sake of a better experience. You do so as well in Amazon. If you don't want to give up personal information, you just don't have to log in to Amazon. You can do it anonymously. Google works the same way. You type in your search term, Caribbean holiday, and Google will give you a useful set of results, and they will also give you some ads on the side. And as your term gets more and more specific, maybe a date range, a price range, and things like that, the ads will get more and more specific and more relevant. Presumably at a certain point, not only are the search terms what you're looking for, but the ads are what you're looking for as well. And so you now have two sets of results to choose from. Now if the one on the right side, the ads, is actually even better than the one in the middle column, you will choose that one and you will click there. But it's your choice. And so, Google knows what you're interested in right now. Do they know who you are? Do they have a profile of you? Not in any real sense. But they're watching as you click. But because we trust Google to watch for the right reason, which is to give us better results, we're okay with this.
I think I first realized that we were on to something when we started looking at the Times Online. And they gave us their logs because they were very interested in what was actually happening as a result of the digital transition, people moving from the physical world into the virtual world. And they're particularly worried about young people. Not reading newspapers, but in the virtual world they might view or read. So there were lots and lots of interesting things. And when we got hold of the data, interestingly, the most interesting thing wasn't the thing that they were worried about. The most interesting thing was the biggest group of users for the Times site were robots. Now, 40, 50 years ago, there were no robot information seekers. No robots were using anything. There were no robots. Now we have a world in which robots go looking for information.
Someday his inventor hopes to build a Super George, controlled by sight, sound, and touch. That'll be the day, girls.
that is what we're doing online. We are clothing ourselves in data, unawares, and we are being judged as we're walking around the internet by who the cookies say we are, and who we declare we are by our Facebook profile or our Twitter stream, or what information we put into whatever website we might go to. Some of us are more aware than others that this is occurring. Most of us honestly have no idea, and if it got turned off tomorrow, would be upset because all of a sudden the services we had wouldn't be as good, because Amazon wouldn't know what they know about you, and eBay wouldn't know what they know about you, and for whatever reason, when you went to your favorite news site, the content you got wasn't customized to who you are, and so on and so forth. We're not aware of the information shadow that we cast and the response to that shadow that occurs automatically now. But as a culture, we are going through that process right now, and it's fascinating.
It's hard to say just how valuable personal information on the web is. I think that most companies would rather have cache to start with, but the information is coming to them almost for free. That is, your clickstream data just comes to the website, comes to advertisers without your actually having to do anything other than just going and clicking on things. So it's a very, very cheap and unobtrusive form of currency. I mean, probably the best thing about it is that it is so unobtrusive. You don't know you're giving it up, and so it seems entirely free to you. And then the consequences of it, maybe you get certain kinds of ads, maybe you get telephone solicitations, but you have no way of knowing that that's because you clicked on 17 things on these 5 websites, and so whatever it is that you're paying for it, you don't really make a connection to the information you're giving up. And I think, frankly, people see cash, individuals see cash differently because it's something that comes straight out of their pocket. The information they give up, they don't see it leaving, and they don't know what anyone's doing with it.
Advertising and targeting, I think that as long as it's transparent at some level, and you, the consumer or the user, have the ability to find out what is being kind of used to your benefit, your supposed benefit, then I feel quite relaxed about it, and actually think that it can be an exciting leap forward. I think that where it becomes tricky is when it's not totally transparent to you, the user, or there is no way of finding out, and I think that that's one of the areas that perhaps we're only beginning to grapple with now.
Mistakes.
Do you think that people are recalibrating their notions of privacy?
Yes, certainly. And it's a cliche, but people are learning that putting stuff out there in the world, as Biz was saying, has some great effects, and things that were private, a lot of things that were private just because it wasn't practical to share them. And so it was strange to share them, so it may be strange to say to the world, hey, I'm having lunch at this place, because I would have never done that before, but that doesn't mean I care, or that it needs to be private.
I think there's been an element of this that's been, there's been a debate not just since the history of the internet, but really since the history of the computer age, is how would computers develop? Would they empower individuals, or would they empower the state?
Paradigm shift comes to mind, but it is absolutely awesome, and it's quite frightening because the scale of the activity, the depth of the activity is just mind-blowing, really. I mean, it's just, for a researcher like myself, it's like finding a massive gold mine. And it's just wonderful, wonderful data that hopefully will change society, that will make sure that in the information-rich world we are in, that people will fully benefit from this fantastic resource. So